Last month, I had the privilege of being interviewed on the Living Out podcast for their series about friendship. I came in on the 6th episode to discuss the challenges of friendship. They're kindred spirits, and we had a great conversation, so I wanted to share that with you today. Like I said, I was episode 6 of 7, so if you enjoy this episode, go check out the rest of the series. It's a refreshingly honest look at everyday life together. I'll link to both their podcast and website in the show notes. Enjoy!
Welcome to the Living Out podcast, helping people, churches, and society talk about faith and sexuality.
Hello and welcome to the Living Out podcast, where we are currently in a series on friendship, a series that is proving really popular and we hope and pray is being a real blessing to people. Friendship is something we really value here at Living Out, and it's one of the things that makes singleness plausible. And so we wanted to take time to talk about it, why it matters, how to do it well, and hopefully to equip all of us to think more deeply at friendship and to greatly enjoy the friendships that God gives us. And today we're going to think particularly about challenges of friendship. We know there are many blessings that come with God's gift of friendship, but also there are challenges, and we thought it'd be good to acknowledge some of those and talk about some of the lessons we've learned as we sought to navigate those ourselves. And so I'm really pleased today to be joined by some guests. I'm Andrew, I should have said that. I'm part of the Living Out team. I'm joined by Adam, who's also part of the Living Out team. Hello, Adam. How are you doing today?
Hello, Andrew. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I'm loving the sunshine. It's changing my day.
I know, finally, right? Yeah, it is nice to finally have a bit of sunshine. And we've also got a new guest of the podcast. Kevin Morris is joining us from the States. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? And while you're doing that, tell us about the podcast that you produce.
Absolutely. So I'm very happy to be here. I find y'all to be kindred spirits. And I am a very single dude who's been single for a very long time with a lot of married friends. And I decided to start a podcast about a year and a half ago that I just found there's a huge gap in people really kind of talking about that and a lot of people being intimidated by it. And I was like, it's really not that hard. I'm kind of an idiot and I can do it. So I imagine other people can as well. And so I just started sitting down with my friends and being like, here's our situation in life. Very blessed with a lot of different situations with friends. And here's how we've made it essentially. And, here's some practical things if you're super intimidated, but also I think it just helps to hear like, oh, this person is, like me. I tried to have a little bit of everyone on there so everyone can relate to someone and be like, oh, maybe I can do this too. And maybe single people will be a little less afraid of married people and vice versa. So I do a podcast called Observations of a Professional Third Wheel. We call it Professional Third Wheel because obviously that's shorter, but that's the full name of it. And it's been a real blessing to me, and I think it's been really weird for my friends because they're putting their voices out there as well. And but I've really grown a lot myself doing it, and I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on people who have really seen themselves in it. So.
That's brilliant. I was telling you before we hit record that I listened to some episodes and that was exactly my story of this is me, this is my life. And really kind of surreal to hear, oh yeah, other people are doing the third wheeling thing as well. Just for people who haven't worked out what that means, Kevin, just give us the quick explanation of what you mean by third wheeling.
Third wheel, yeah. Well, if you put third wheel into Google, the results are not flattering. I found that out. And but yeah, third wheeling, it's the 3 wheels on a bike. There's kind of people are like, oh, a bicycle should have 2 wheels and 3 wheels is like training wheels kind of thing. But I'm actually like, well, no, the third wheel is actually kind of a stabilizer, right? So the way I've tried to look at it is trying to commandeer that negativity a little bit, because if you search third wheel, you get a lot of memes of people making out on the couch while there's a single friend watching a movie next to them or something like that. And it's just not how it needs to be. And it's just, honestly, I've never had any friends do that to me. And so, yeah, I'm really trying to push back on the negativity of that. But my friends gave me the name Professional Third Wheel. I did not give that to myself. I just took it and ran with it. I decided to choose to take that as a compliment and make it one. So
absolutely, I think it's a great title, and it got me thinking. I want to ask any fun third wheeling stories that we have. Mine's quite hot off the press. Only a few weeks ago, I was in London at the Opera. Note, regular listeners will know my love for musical theatre. I went up market that night, went to the Opera. It happened to be Valentine's Day evening, just because it was the night I could make it to this particular opera I wanted to see. And I was sitting on the end of a row, which I always do to let the leg room. But during the interval, this guy comes up to me. He says, "Are you on your own and are you on the end of the row?" I'm like, yeah. And he had some sort of knee issue, and so sitting further down on this row, not be able to stretch out his legs, apparently he was in agony, and so he asked would I be able to swap with him. And so I thought, well, I better be nice and say yes. So halfway through the interval, I go down the row to take the seat that he'd be in. What he didn't tell me when he asked me to move is he was on a date with a woman on Valentine's Day evening. And so she then feels obliged to kind of make friendly conversation with me for the rest of the interval, when she's basically stood up by this guy who's abandoned her to go and nick my seat at the end of the row. And she was very nice, but it was a slightly odd and awkward situation where I kind of gate crashed this Valentine's Day evening date and inadvertently found myself as a bit of a third wheel in that situation. But it now is a story I am loving telling. So at least there is that silver lining to it.
Oh, Andrew, you've now helped me to remember a good third wheel. So when I was back at university, one of my housemate who never cooks, he invited me for dinner. He said, I'm going to cook you dinner. And I remember coming back from some lectures and he was working so hard. And I was just really impressed by the meal he was making. And I lived with, we were 2 out of 7 in our house, and he hadn't invited the other 5. He'd only invited me and then a girl from my course. and he decided not to tell me that she was the only other guest until her arrival, and we just had to deal with it.
Wow, that is brilliant. Kevin, fun stories or redeem us, show us how good it can be to be the third wheel, maybe actually is what I should be asking. Sorry.
Oh, man. Well, it's so funny because I've been trying to be so optimistic on this podcast, but I am a pessimist by nature, so it's already been a fight for me to stay that way. But no, I'll tell a story about, I tell this on, I think maybe the 4th episode of the podcast, but I've got a married couple friend who have a now 5-year-old, which is insane. And back when she was maybe around like 1 or 2, we do this thing called Boo at the Zoo every year, which is Nashville Zoo has like a Halloween thing that you can take your kids to and trick or treat and all that. And we were getting ready to go, and we were all dressed up, and she had this little dinosaur costume that we were trying to put her in. So, we lay her on the changing table and we're trying to get her in this thing. And my friend Lauren didn't realize that it was too small. She had bought it way earlier and she didn't realize how much her kid was going to grow by then. And so, the husband actually had stepped out to go get something for a while. So it was just me and her. And we were trying to get this kid in this costume. And she eventually kind of gets her arm like chicken winged, like trying to pull it out of the armholes of the thing. And so the kid is just like screaming in agony. And we're like, what are we going to do? And of course, she's trying to get her arm out. So she's like, please go in there, find the scissors. Like I'm running around finding the scissors and like, where are they? Ryan knows where they are. I don't know where they are. She's like, oh, they're here. And so I get them and we come in there. And then there's this like trying to hold this kid still while you like cut around her arm. We basically made her like little Flintstones arm sleeves, all jagged and everything. And, but she's screaming the whole time like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. And I'm like trying to distract her and like do all this stuff, making stupid noises. And we finally get her cut out and we're just like go and just collapse on the couch and just breathe heavy for a few minutes. And the husband gets back and he goes, what happened? And she goes, you weren't here and I needed you. And Kevin had to step in. And so we made it work. But it was it's kind of one of those moments that she's like, I don't know what I would have done had you not been here, because I don't think that was a one-person job. And so it was funny to be there for that moment. And it's a great way to step in, because life happens. If you're around, it happens, and you just got to jump in. So.
Well, that's a great example. There's humour there, but also you're showing, there's great value in us being third wheels and being involved in other people's lives. Let's pause there. We're going to dive in just a moment, talking about our topic today of challenges of friendship. So one of the first challenges I want us to think about is about practical challenges. That could be things about kind of physical distance from where friends are, could be changes in circumstances for us or for our friends. Any advice, guys, on how we can navigate some of the practical challenges we might face in our friendships?
Well, I was reflecting on this question, and I realise sometimes when our friendships change, because maybe we move away or someone else moves away, like social media can give us this impression that we can stay connected to them and we can continue to have exactly the same friendship we've always had. And that probably is true in like 1 or 2 cases, but that's not true in the majority. And I was reflecting, actually, it's quite healthy, isn't it, to embrace the fact that God, who can exist everywhere, has created us so that we can only exist in one location. And there are moments in life where we move away or someone else moves away, where it's actually just accepting that friendship has changed. And that act of accepting it is actually quite helpful. And I also think it then drives us to invest in the people who geographically are based around us. and we're going to bump into when we go to the shops or when we go to church, or we're walking down the street. And actually those are the people who maybe God is calling us to be better friends with.
Yeah, I think it's good, it's okay to accept that friendships do change over time, and sometimes practical circumstances change a friendship, but that is okay. And actually success in a friendship or mature friendship isn't that for all of our lives now, it's always exactly the same. And some friendships do radically change. And so a real life example would be, after we get off the call today, I'm driving up to the Midlands for a living out event, but staying with some friends tonight. And I lived in the same town as these friends for 4 years, were really, really close to them. I still am really close to them, but my relationship with them now, living a long way away from them, is radically different to when we were in the same town. I haven't seen them since Christmas, I guess, a couple of months ago. But when I turn up, it'll be easy for us to be very comfortable together, catch up, enjoy 24 hours together. And so the friendship has changed because of distance, but it's still a friendship. But it's okay, we've not tried to keep it exactly as it was, because that wouldn't be possible. So I think it's agreeing with you, Adam, and putting some kind of flesh on the bones of that. Actually, it's okay that distance does change it. And I agree, actually. There's a real value in prioritising or making sure we still put our effort into local relationships where we can be in and out of each other's lives day by day.
Yeah, and I'm definitely I've got a loyalty that gets me into trouble sometimes because it's unfounded. So I'll be extremely loyal to a friendship that does change to a degree where I'm not accepting that sometimes, and I'm trying to make something happen that is just not going to happen. Because at the end of the day, I do want my friends who move away to be involved with their local community and be plugged in on a local level as well, which means they do have less time to connect with me. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of intention to connect with people at a distance. Which, I think intentionality it will save you from a lot of these pitfalls that we're going to talk about today, just having that with people. But I've also been, yes, people move away and all that, but I've also been really surprised by how many people that I have known on a kind of acquaintance basis at one point in my life become my best friends later in life, just because the stages of life change and you get thrown together in a time that you didn't realize. Or, me, one of my friends in college that I'm super close to, him and his wife now, we live together. Mostly we threw ourselves together after all our friends started leaving after college, and we just felt really lonely and really betrayed by everybody who was moving away. And we're like, well, we should just hang out together more, and now we're super close, but we weren't as close before that. And so, yeah, it is a constant changing landscape. And I think you're right you need to be open to who's in front of you, especially because I think the Lord puts people in front of us for a reason.
And that's a nice example of how, change in circumstance impacted some friendships, but actually then strengthened some others. And actually how how God uses these things actually brings good out of what even can be painful, actually, if friends move away, say. But actually it works on both sides.
I think that's kind of one of the things about, what I'm trying to do with single and married people is I think a lot of times single people are like, I don't have any friends. And what they have in front of them is a lot of married people. And they go, well, those can't be my friends. And I go, no, you've got friends in front of you. The Lord has put these people in front of you. You're shying away from it, And so I think at a time where there are so many people who are relationally poor, we can't really afford to be picky about who the Lord puts in front of us and who we choose to interact with in some ways, especially if it's in a church setting and we're seeing these people on a weekly basis. Just say, hey, see where it goes. Maybe that's not going to be your best friend, but don't write off people. I don't think we should be doing that based off of life circumstances, because it might take a different type of friendship, but my friendships have only gotten sweeter as circumstances have changed, and I don't think that has to be a deterrent.
Yeah, amen. And actually, I think it is about accepting that the circumstances have changed and then embracing it, because sometimes we can hark back to university days. I used to love those days where I could hang out with my friends and still be talking at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yes.
And that's just not possible anymore.
Yes.
But actually, there's a whole new world of friendship open in front of us. And I think a good question I sometimes ask myself, and probably should ask myself more, is how can I be a good friend to this person? Rather than harking back, okay, that's a friendship we used to be, how can I be a good friend to them right now? And actually pushing into the current moment that God has placed us in.
That's really good. The other thing I was reflecting is just the importance of communication, which I think Kevin might have said is going to come a few times, of as circumstances change, rather than therefore a friendship fizzling out, or rather than just getting resentful about that. Actually, I've just learned the importance of just trying to communicate about it. So I think some of my friendships really changed when I changed jobs at one point, because a lot of my friends were colleagues I was working with. And just we had to communicate about that and talk about how we now going to be deliberate, given we're not seeing each other each day in an office, how we're now going to be deliberate about still fostering good communication and fostering a meaningful friendship. And so communication is being deliberate about it in light of the changed circumstances was necessary, all the while mixing that with what we already said of actually it's okay that sometimes it makes quite a fundamental change to the nature of friendship, and that's okay because God sometimes leads in different directions with different friendships, and that's normal. That's healthy even. What about, I think about another area of challenges, what about more emotional challenges? What kind of examples can you hear, the kind of challenges you might face, and what's your advice for handling some of those sorts of challenges in friendships?
I think I've actually had a lot of friends recently who have come into friendships and have had some pretty bad ones in the past, have been, betrayed or abandoned, or they felt like they'd been abandoned because of circumstances or people moving away or changes of worldview, things like that, to where they're like, hey, I put all this time and effort into this friendship, and then this person just walked away from it, so I'm not really looking for another one, kind of. And that can be really hard when you're someone who's like, I am trying to be open and vulnerable. I am trying to be deep with you, and I can't get there because you're not trusting me. Like, there's not a reciprocation of that level of trust. And you get it because you're like, no, that stinks. It's just like when you're in a relationship, if someone cheats on you, right? Like, you're going to be a lot more careful in the future, and you're going to be a little bit insecure. And so I think some people can come in with that, which is unfortunate. Or, in my world with singles and marrieds, like, we're people, we get it wrong. Like, sometimes couples do make single people feel single. Sometimes it's the single person themselves making themselves feel single, but sometimes it actually happens, and then they start looking for that in everybody else because one person messed up or whatever, and that can really hinder you from jumping into something that might be different. It's really hard to see people as individuals sometimes when it's like, oh, well, this situation hurt me before, I'm not going to go get in that situation, even though the people are different.
I think some, not all, but a fair number of the emotional challenges I faced in friendship have been because of me. And it's easy to think they're emotional challenges and basically to point the finger. And I've just realised the importance of me realising, as is true for all of us, how much my background, my insecurities impact my relationships with people. And actually one of the best things I can do for the health of my friendships is to face up to the reality that I, like all of us, am impacted by my background, insecurities and such like. And actually thinking about those, engaging with those, being honest with myself and others about those puts me in a better place actually to engage well with people. And even little tools like I've noticed, Jess, sometimes I need to ask myself if I have an emotional reaction to something in a friendship. Sometimes I just need to pause and ask myself, are my emotions in this moment proportional to what has happened? What else actually is affecting me? Which could be, actually something in a friendship has hit on a nerve of an insecurity I hold. It could just be it's Friday evening and work's being stressful this week. And so actually that silly little thing that just happened or they just said, which maybe wasn't the most sensible or most sensitive thing, has really wound me up, not because it was actually a big deal, but because I'm already kind of on edge. And just sometimes I realise actually I need to look at myself before looking at others when I'm thinking about the emotional challenges, and how do I seek to handle my emotions well and navigate the challenges that might come up there.
And it is interesting, isn't it, how actually Scripture, I think, speaks quite a lot into that emotional brokenness which exists within friendship, because actually most of us, well, if people are anything like me, I should say, I can really struggle to apologise and I can really struggle to talk to someone when I feel that they've wronged me. And actually, within friendships, that can be happening all the time. If they're real friendships, then we're going to annoy each other, and I'm going to do something wrong, and they're going to do something wrong, because that's the reality of rubbing shoulder to shoulder. And I was just reflecting on, famous words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. So that's Matthew chapter 5, verse 23. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. And actually, I think those are words we've just got to embody if we want to have healthy friendships, which, oh, surprise, surprise, embodying Jesus' words might be a good idea.
Who knew?
Who knew? But I remember years ago, I was at communion, at church, we were just about to take communion, and I felt a strong conviction from the Spirit, meditating on these words, that actually I couldn't take it until I had apologised for something that I'd done in a friendship situation. And actually, it's interesting, after that apology, and then that person then apologised to me for other stuff, that did bring about healing. Not necessarily saying that the friendship's exactly how it was, but it has brought about a healing. And I do think we need to push into that when we experience the emotional brokenness.
Yeah. Maybe that leads us on nicely to think about being vulnerable with our friends, and that in itself can be a challenge, can open up challenges, but also we know how important vulnerability and honesty is. So often actually we breed intimacy through being vulnerable and honest with people, but also it can be scary, it can be risky in a sense. Any thoughts on, how we can be vulnerable but in a way which is safe, which is sensible, which is helpful to friendship?
Well, I think there's a lot of things you can do to make it easier to be vulnerable, just for a start. And again, I'll probably reference married and singles a lot because that's where I live. But there's kind of a difference between like just going to hang out and going to actually like be a part of someone's life. You know, if you're not really invited into the mess, then you don't really stay very long, right? Like, because kids got to go to bed at some point, all this kind of stuff. So to just being there while life actually happens is a really great way to enter into vulnerability a lot quicker, because you're going to see your friends in their natural state. They can't hide it forever, even if you're there. If you're there the whole night and they're putting the kids to bed, you're going to see them slip up. You're going to see how they actually treat their wife, how they actually treat their kids, how they actually, move about their lives. And so they can't really hide their vulnerability from you in that way, in some ways. And you being around for that also helps. They get to see how you interact in all those situations. Doing that kind of stuff together, I feel more naturally leads into verbal vulnerability. I feel like when you're actually seeing where each other lives, it's a bit harder to be like, I don't struggle with anger because I just yelled at so-and-so today or whatever. Like, okay, no, you definitely struggle with that. Let's talk about that. Let's pray about that. You still have to be intentional about it, because it is still very uncomfortable to tell someone, I do this thing that's not right and I need to be forgiven for it and I need your help. Like that never feels good when you're doing it. It always feels good when you're done.
I think my great advice with vulnerability is be vulnerable. Like, if you want deeper, richer, more vulnerable friendships, you've got to start. And the reality is that will always require bravery and courage. And so you've got to be brave and be courageous and open up about yourself. And I think we've got to be wise in that. We shouldn't be open and vulnerable with everyone. And actually, there are people in life who are open and vulnerable with absolutely everyone. And it can feel a bit strange sometimes. But I think if we prayerfully ask the Lord, lead me to wise, trustworthy people, and then with those people we're just the first one who is open and honest, then that actually almost creates an invitation for them to be open and honest back. And it might not happen straight away, but over time, once we've been open and honest, I think that does lead to us down a path towards other open and honest people.
Yeah, I totally agree. The best way to help a friend be vulnerable with you is to be vulnerable with them. In the sense, we open the door by doing it ourselves. And almost if we're not prepared to do that first, we can't expect people to be vulnerable with us. But also I've learned just to start with small steps with the newer friends, start with small steps and almost kind of testing the water. Because actually there'll be some friendships where real vulnerability, bearing all your soul, is a huge blessing and you really connect on that and they're a big blessing to you. There's some friendships actually where, because of different personalities or because of different maturity levels or whatever, maybe it doesn't work so well. And it's okay that some friendships aren't actually really deep and close like that. And taking small steps just to kind of test the water, I think, can be helpful, rather than kind of going, all in, showing everything, deepest, darkest secrets of your life and soul, first time. Not knowing how someone will respond, taking those small steps can be helpful to start.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis says, to love at all is to be vulnerable. And then Jesus tells the world, they'll know you by your love for each other. So I feel like, particularly for Christians, vulnerability in friendships, like that should make Christian friendships stand apart from everybody else's, and it should make them more desirable to everyone else. Like, people should see our friendships in the level of depths that we have with each other because we're vulnerable like that and go, I want that. I don't have that. People aren't being as intentional. They're not really seeing me. And that should draw people to the church as a whole. That should be a witness, actually, our friendships with other Christians. The enemy loves to make us feel like we're the only one who struggles with our sin, right? I'm the only one who thinks this way, or I'm the only one who does this thing. And then you get into a group of friends and somebody says, hey, I did this thing the other night. And you go, oh, you too? I thought I was the only one. And then it kind of loses a bit of power at that point, because you're like, oh, I'm not actually the only person in the world who has this problem or feels this way. And also, because this person has this, we can keep each other accountable and maybe do a little bit less of that thing. And so there's a power even just in admitting that kind of stuff and opening up to each other to free other people from that stuff.
Hello, this is Ed, interrupting your enjoyment of a Living Out podcast. I'm very sorry, but it is to invite you to join our mailing list so that you can hear more about what Living Out is up to, both through this podcast and through everything that happens on our website and in the real world too. The way you can do that is by going to the website and just scrolling down to the bottom of any page, and there's something that says stay in the loop, and all you need to do is provide us your name and email and your consent, and then we will very happily keep you in contact with everything that happens at Living Out. Now back to enjoying that podcast.
One final challenge we want to discuss is about sharing hard truths. A really important part of friendship, part of the honesty, part of iron sharpening iron and being a blessing to each other. Might be us sharing things that our friends will find difficult to hear from us. Might be them actually speaking into our lives, things that we find difficult. Part of that important two-way nature of friendship. Something difficult, a big challenge, but also really important. Let's start, guys, just thinking about as we seek to share stuff with our friends. Let's think a bit about what that kind of stuff might be and particularly how we can do that well. Any examples or any wisdom of how we share hard truths with our friends well?
I always think about, I had a friend a long time ago who we became really good friends, but we had kind of a rocky start. You know, maybe we tried to hang out like 6 times and maybe one of those happened, and it was always like a last minute cancellation on her part. And there was finally a night where she was just like an hour, not even an hour before she was supposed to be there. She's like, hey, I don't think I'm going to come tonight. I just don't feel good or whatever. And I finally just kind of like had to take a deep breath and be like, all right, I can't let this keep going. Like I've got to say something. There's just no future here. And so I sat down and like read and reread a message I wrote out for like an hour before I sent it, because I was just so afraid, because this is one of those risky things, right? Like if you're open with somebody, say, hey, this is how you're making me feel. Like they may just walk away from you. It's how it is. But I basically just told her, like, you know, I really am trying to be persistent, but I don't know how long I can keep it up if you're not reciprocating at all. And it keeps feeling like this, because I do have other friends, right? And I am trying to make time for you. And it was funny because after that, it never happened again. Maybe once, never happened again. But our friendship grew so much because she said, I felt a level of trust for you at that point because you were willing to call me out and tell me something that was hard, that wasn't very flattering to me, in favor of the friendship. And she goes, after that, I just felt like if I did something, you would call me on it. So I think oftentimes those hard conversations, as rough as they are to actually do, and as often as they don't go well, I think they really can lead to truer intimacy just because you were willing to put it out there at all. Because you just don't do that for people you don't truly love.
Yeah, that's true. It's part of that, vulnerability we were talking about earlier. Maybe you're putting yourself in a vulnerable situation by doing that. But actually, that can be used to deepen a friendship. Adam, any wisdom from your experiences of sharing hard truths with friends?
Yeah, say less. I think sometimes we feel like we have to justify the fact that we want to say this hard truth. And in the act of justifying it, we make the whole situation so much worse.
Yeah.
And we dig a big hole. And actually, I think just saying it very simply, this happened and I didn't like it because, can you please not do it again? And because, in my very English culture, rebuking is not part of what we do, and we sort of subtly between the lines have a go at each other. That very act of saying something straightforward, which is challenging, is so countercultural that actually you're just saying one little thing. For most people, that is, not for everyone, but for most people, they'll hear it quite really loudly. So actually you don't want to say very much. You just want to keep it quite simple. And also it just avoids you then digging that hole and making the situation worse. And I also think we just got to be careful when we are doing a rebuke. Saying, this is what happened, I didn't like it, please do it again, is a nice simple little system, because sometimes we can put a lot of blame into it. And actually we then start to make the person feel really, really bad about what they've done. And I just don't think that's healthy. And then it might make them quite defensive. And once someone's got defensive, then we're not in a good place.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And I before I ever say anything to any of my friends that I consider like I'm not thrilled to say this thing to them, I usually run it by my other friends first and just keep it anonymous. Don't tell them who it's about, but just here's what's going on. Like, do you think I'm right to say this? Do you think this is going to be, the way I'm saying this is going to be more hurtful than it's worth doing, and just kind of get some feedback on that. Like, if I said this to you, how would you feel? Would you still want to be my friend? And just kind of see, because sometimes you can get a lot of clarity in your own selfishness. Sometimes you're coming to the table with a lot more fault than you think you are.
It's really helpful wisdom. I find it helpful just to, as we kind of said, not to rush and actually to first look at myself and ask myself, is what I want to say to this person actually fair? Why do I want to say this? Is it actually for their good and for the good of our friendship? Or is it actually because it's going to do something in me? I'm getting my own back, or actually it's about an insecurity in me rather than actually in the friendship. And just to pause and think more deeply, I find helpful. And then I think the other thing for sharing hard truths with others is to do it in the context of inviting the same, actually to ask the questions about us, to to openly invite a friend to share hard truths with us and to be honest. And I'll sometimes kind of preface a conversation by saying something like, can we have an awkward conversation? Can I offer you a bit of a challenge? And I think actually it's all right to say, I always want you to be able to do the same to me, actually share those things to me. Is there anything you're spotting in my life that you think actually you should be calling me out on? Because it should be a two-way thing, which nicely leads us to think actually and to ask, but how do we receive things well? When friends have hard truths to share with us, what's our brief bits of wisdom on how we can receive those things well?
My housemate was a very, very wise man. And he has this phrase in like conflict that Christians don't have to win. Because often when someone raises something with you, my first response, not everyone's, my first response is I want to fight. They've hurt me and I want to fight them back. They've said something mean and I want to be mean back. And actually Christians don't have to win. Like I received a 9-minute voice note the other day telling me off for something. And there was lots in there which I thought was unfair and unjust. But there was some things in there which I thought were fair and were just. And that sense that Christian doesn't have to win. Okay, I'm going to ignore the things which I didn't think were fair and just. And I'm going to apologise for what I do think I have done wrong. And that actually, I think, then creates a bridge builder. Says, yeah, you've got a right to say something into my life. And I want you to say something into my life. And what I've done wrong, I'm going to apologise for. But I'm not going to try and win this fight.
Yeah, it's definitely a pride thing. It hits you real hard when someone says, hey, you've done this thing or whatever. And it is really hard for me to step back and be like, maybe they're right. Maybe I did. Like, let me examine that. And it's just never fun for anyone to do. But I find that one thing that kind of helps, and a lot of my friends have done this with me, which has helped me a lot when I've had to say things to them, as well as to give permission beforehand, just in the friendship in general. Like, I don't know when that really happens, if it's when you first get real close or it's just one night where you're like, hey, I want you to call me out if I ever do this thing or whatever. But particularly if you know some of the things that you struggle with, like just telling them like, hey, I give you permission to call me out when I do this. Like, be kind, be gentle. Maybe I'm squishy, but like, please call me out because I want to get better. And if I'm doing this thing that's not good and it's hurting you, then I don't want to do that. I might not be aware of it. And that's really helped. There's been several times where I've said things that I didn't realize were hurtful. And then my friend just came back. It's like, hey, you said this thing and it was just awkward to me. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much for telling me, because I now won't say that thing and hurt you every single time by accident, And, but the fact that if you give them permission ahead of time and they call you out and you start to feel defensive, they can always just say, well, you told me to tell you. And that helps a lot sometimes, to have your past self rebuking your future self in some ways.
Yeah. That's really helpful. Guys, we are fast running out of time, so we're going to have to start wrapping up. But it's been such a helpful conversation. Listeners, I hope you found it helpful to think about what some of those challenges in friendship might be and hear some of our experiences, some wisdom. Hopefully there's wisdom in there as tools for your own friendships. Big thanks to Adam and Kevin for joining me. Do go and check out Kevin's podcast. We'll put the link in the show notes, and we'll stick some links as well to other resources that might be helpful for thinking about this topic of challenges in friendships. And thanks to you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, to share the podcast, rate and review us. That really helps people to find the Living Out podcast. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with the final episode in this friendship series, talking to some real life friends of Living Out team members. One not to be missed. So we'll see you then in a couple of weeks' time.